Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to Samuel Adams Returns. Those anti-federalists absolutely got it correct. This is Tom Navulis, your host, and we will be discussing a very unique anti-federalist today as we look at mercy, lawfare, and discouragement. And yes, it is on you, the listeners, to do. Now, we have a lot of people out there that are active. But what it comes down to ultimately is for us to act. We still have so many people that are out there that are engaged in the mental play of what it means to fight for our liberty, and only the 1% that are actually doing something. So with today's program, especially as we talk about our most interesting, if you will, anti-federalist today, and as I dissect what that person has to say, that I hope it gives you the impetus to truly act. It is no longer any time with everything that's going on right now in the votes in Congress and what this Speaker of the House is trying to do in conjunction with the Uniparty. It is time to act. You have to make the phone calls. You have to send the messages to not only your federal elected people, but your state, and where you can become involved in local. So let's just get to it. All right. This week's program is Mercy, Lawfare and Discouragement in particular. Now, this is straight out of the works of Mercy Otis Warren and what she had to write in 1788, and as we come to what lawfare was discussed and the discouragements that occur in that, and commerce from Samuel Adams as he wrote in 1764 and designed the letter of instruction to those representatives that were going into the local House of Representatives there in the Massachusetts colony. Both of these historic writings are absolutely relevant for our present. Now, as we take and we look at this, and as how I'm going to highlight the distinctives of, and distinctive, you can go look at the arguments. Distinctives can be used as a noun. I just had to throw that in there because it's interesting. Anyway, I'm getting off track a little bit, but it is language. And that's the problem with today, is language and history has been so manipulated that 98 to 99% of even conservatives are confused about the truth and don't act according to their core principles, because even their elected confuse them in the use of language. So anyway, the distinctives that Mercy talks about in particular are those related to liberty, to slavery, tyranny, and despotism. Everything that's going on today. There was an article out there about the communist Whoopi Goldberg saying that Trump's going to lead us back into slavery. What a foolish, ignorant, imbecilic, cretin woman. We're already in slavery. By the definitions of Mercy, by the definitions of the anti-federalist, we're in slavery. And we're going to talk about that. Now, Sam Adams, we'll talk about him in regards to being that older contemporary of Mercy, because they were. Mercy was actually part of the crowd, part of the guys, if you will, with Sam Adams, with her husband, with her brother, James Otis, and the others there in the Massachusetts colony. She was a very intellectual woman. If you want to study somebody, if you want to get the women and girls in your family to understand true, patriotic, female action, they need to study Mercy Otis Warren. I've told you that before. I talked about her in other programs. Anyway, what we have is Sam's going to talk about lawfare from that 1764 letter of instruction. Discouragements in Congress. Almost the same words as to what we have today. And what it means in the destruction and discouragement of liberty, property, and civil society. So history is no longer. No longer. History no longer holds the significance that enshrined the principles of governing humanity in a republic. It doesn't matter anymore. In fact, as clearly pointed out in my programs over the last month or so, politics and economic theology are rooted in humanism of the last 100 years plus. Even more, you have to look at how the progressives not only desire but are fully wiping out fundamental history, virtue, morals, and principles completely out of the common mechanisms of education, business, government, and yes, even religion. The following is a direct quote from the preface of The Biblical Structure of History by Gary North. And in the preface, that would be pages 12 and 13. So I'm going to read this to you because I think it sets up what we're going to be talking about in the next two segments. Gary North writes, Singer's essay was titled The Problem of Historical Interpretation. He began his essay with this paragraph. Some 5 years ago, at the annual meeting of the American Historical Association, the writer had the occasion to meet informally with a group of more famous historians in attendance at the conference. The subject under discussion was the meaning and purpose of history. These half-dozen scholars were of the opinion that history lacks any decisive meaning and any discernible purpose. The writer then posed to this group of distinguished scholars one question. If this be the case, then why do we teach history? The scholars looked at him with surprise and even disgust, but no answer was forthcoming from any of them. The group broke up as each went to his own particular luncheon group and discussion of various phases of a subject which they could not really justify as a part of a college curriculum, and yet which they continue to teach as if the knowledge of it had some inherent value. So in the second paragraph of his essay, he drew a conclusion regarding the world of humanist academia. The incident is, and quoting again from Singer, the incident is by no means unique. The professional historians in this country and in Europe have come to the place where they have little faith in the subject to which they have devoted their lives. Historians with increasing and distressing frequency are openly admitting that history has no meaning and shows little or no purpose or goals. But neither is this anti-intellectual attitude peculiar to the professional historians. The existentialists and positive philosophies have entered into the thinking of most areas of human thought and activity with devastating results. In conjunction with Freudian school in psychology, they have made irrationalism and anti-intellectualism fashionable. and have virtually removed the concept of purpose and meaning from the thinking of many historians and those who proclaim themselves to be social scientists. Gary North continues, his assessment was correct. Leading historians in the 70s no longer had faith that history reveals any authoritative meaning or purpose. This lack of faith is far more widespread today. And when Gary North was writing his book, this was already now in the late 2000s, moving into the 21st century. So he goes on to say is that this lack of faith is far more widespread today. It has been building for half a century before Singer wrote his essay. So just to add my 2 cents to that, is that defining and teaching history is now the scripting of ideologist instead of research fact with foundation. And what we have is this total rewriting of history that we're seeing. And in addition to that, we have all of these other theories, these ideologies that are supplanting our history. So we have DEI, CRT, all of the feminist insanities, all that we have even on the moral basis in relationship to human beings in particular, is that there is no gender. That's all historically set. It goes back from a historical and biblical setting, is that God created. God is the foundation of history because he created time and space, the earth, humans, every aspect of that. So Gary North's book, in his writing that I mentioned just a few moments ago, is The Biblical Structure of History, really dissects what has happened to history and what it means for us, even with this program, to give the structure of biblical, true biblical history a substantial place and factual argument. And being able to do that so that it can make that difference in our culture. It can make that difference in business. It can make that difference in politics. And to which I started this month and haven't had the opportunity again to get back to that about the economic theology. Yes, even in economics. Everything, as I mentioned, often in this programming has a foundational theological basis. What religion is being followed to determine how decisions are being made, not only in the larger governmental and institutional perspective, but even in families. Even in families. Why would parents take and allow and raise their children in such a manner that they would accept the destruction of that baby that they held from the womb? Why would they allow that? They have no historical significance or meaning as to what a human baby is. Therefore, they're willing to allow it to be dissected into something else. History matters. Theology matters. History with substance and purpose matters. I don't recall who it was that said it. You know who it is. That said, if you don't know your history, you're doomed to repeat it. And, in fact, what we're repeating now is the history of Sodom, Gomorrah, and even pre-flood in so many different ways. Samuel Adams knew his history. Mercy Otis Warren knew their history. And come on back as we get into that history with Mercy. And welcome back to the second segment of Samuel Adams Returns, and we're going to get right into it, and starting with mercy. So I'm starting with mercy, and boy, do we need God's mercy in our present day. I'm only going to highlight the punch-in-the-nose type paragraphs at the very beginning, actually, of what Mercy wrote, and then just going to try and expound and dissect some of that while I read those paragraphs with my commentary that I usually do in programming like this. So it's only going to be a smidgen because there's no possible way that we can get into the depth of it, but I'm going to continue to challenge you to go to SamuelAdamsReturns.net and click on the link for Mercy's writing. It's just really important. But here also there is the newsletter, which you can take and read the sections that I'm going to be talking about right now. And I did modernize a few of the words there so that they just make sense and don't come up, strange looking to you, as well as I will define words by using the parens and italics. So I wanted you to know that when you go look at what's there at the newsletter for today's program, that you'll see that anything in italics and in a paren is the definition of the preceding word there. So let's get into it, and I'll interject into the paragraph as I think it's critical to do it, or important to bring your thought process to the front. So Mercy starts out, mankind may assume themselves with theoretic systems of liberty and trace its social and moral effects on science, virtue, industry, and every improvement of which the human mind is capable. Now, I wanted to start right there is that we're talking about theoretic systems. Theoretic systems also equates to theological systems, because what is theoretical can also, as we're learning when I'm talking about economic theology, they look at the theory of theology even in humanistic forms of economics. So they're giving it to this deep, in-depth study. So we're moving from just the theoretic, and that's where she's talking about the Constitution, because this paper is on none other than a commentary about the Constitution of 1787. So she's looking at what they're discussing here as the Constitution being theoretical. It's a system of liberty. It has and trace its social moral effects. So we're looking at both a social and moral effects that are dealt with within the structure of a constitution. And then what does it have? Those effects have on science, which we're seeing. And as we're seeing, history has no meaning. Theology has no meaning. God has no meaning. Anything of substance that they understood at this time no longer has meaning relative to science, virtue, industry, and everything else that has any type of improvement of the human mind. We're seeing that question. So Mercy takes and she looks at it in a very disciplined manner. And she continues with this, but we can only discern its true value by the practical and wretched effects of slavery. Right there. Will this Constitution lead to slavery? And we're not talking about racial slavery. We're talking about the slavery of every citizen. So Whoopi Goldberg, she likes to make it racial. No, we live in slavery now because of what Mercy's talking about is the true value by the practical and wretched effects. And thus, dreadfully, will they be realized when the inhabitants of the eastern states are dragging out a miserable existence. Only a miserable existence. That's what we have, not just in the eastern states of that time, but we have in the whole nation right now under Biden economics. We are dragging out a miserable existence only on the gleanings of their field. The gleanings, that means the last little portions that are out there from our industry, from our hard work. And the southern, blessed with a softer and more fertile climate, are languishing in hopeless poverty. And when asked what has become of the flower of their crop and the rich produce of their farms, they may answer in what the hapless style of the man of La Mancha, and quote, "The steward of my lord has seized and sent it to Madrid," end quote. Or, in the more literal language of truth, the exigencies, which is the demands, urgency, urgent need or want of government, require that the collectors of the revenue should transmit it to the federal city. Right there. She was predicting in a most literal manner, a literal language, our present situation of taxation. It's taken and it's all collected and sent to the federal city. Every aspect of our endeavors, our work, how we spend our money and its taxation, all are transmitted to the federal city because they urgently need or want it. She continues, animated with the firmest zeal for the interest of this country, the peace and union of the American states, and the freedom and happiness of a people who have made the most costly sacrifices in the cause of liberty, who have braved the power of Britain, weathered the convulsions of war, and waded through the blood of friends and foes to establish their independence and to support the freedom of the human mind. Now, stop right there, because not only does it talk about, and we have to consider liberty in the effects of what is property, what is all of those other aspects, but it is the human mind is as critical as any other aspect of liberty. Now, this is very much in our present with the political machine and the media. Even then, the Anglican Church, and you have to understand their Tory politics and their Tory media were detailing how the people should think and behave. This was part of the fight, the blood that was spilt for liberty during the American separation from Britain. And she continues, I cannot silently witness this degradation without calling on them, and this be you. How will you act? You must be called upon before they are compelled to blush at their own servitude. Are you blushing at your servitude yet? And to turn back their languid, their drooping, dull eyes on their lost liberties. We hear people all the time talking about, our lost liberties, our lost liberties. But what are you doing about it? To consider that the character of nations generally changes at the moment of revolution. And when patriotism is discountenanced, that means it's abashed, it's discouraged, it's frowned upon. And public virtue becomes the ridicule of the sycophant. That's an informer. In general, is a parasite, a mean flatterer, especially a flatterer of princes and great men. Hence, a deceiver or an imposter. So you have the ridicule of the sycophant, which is exactly what the media is, with all the talking heads, with all of those demons in Congress and the bureaucracies are the sycophants that are destroying public virtue, that are destroying patriotism. She goes on, when every man of liberty, firmness, and penetration who cannot lick the hand stretched out to oppress is deemed an enemy of the state. Well, if you don't accept what they're doing, the hands that are out there to oppress, if you're not licking those hands, you're an enemy of the state. So again, let's take time to consider the worst degradation that those who are elected should feel for how they govern. Calling themselves defenders of liberty? They're not. The character of our nation has changed with the revolution starting with Obama's, quote, fundamentally change America, to Biden's lawless opening the doors to invasion of illegals. Patriotism in our time is discountenanced, to which the sycophants of education, media, and religion deem we who hold what? Truth. Biblical religion, truth, and the republic as enemies of the state. Now, I'm not sure I have a lot of time more here to continue on with this. Now, I want you to consider each of these clauses. So you're going to need to go to SamuelAdamsReturns.net and read this, because you have to consider these, because I'm going to go fast. She goes on to say, then is the gulf of despotism set open, and the grades, which are the steps or degrees to slavery, though rapid, are scarce, which means not abundant, perceptible, that they're known of. So this slavery is rapid, but scarcely perceptible. Then genius drags heavily its iron chains. Science is neglected, and real merit flies to the shades for security from reproach. Now here it is. The mind becomes enervated. That means weakened, enfeebled, emasculated. And the national character sinks to a kind of apathy with only energy sufficient to curse the breast that gave it milk. And that's what we're doing. We're cursing our founding fathers. We're cursing Mercy Otis Warren and others. We're cursing those that gave us the milk of liberty and freedom. And as an elegant writer observes, quote, to bewail every new birth as an increase of misery under a government where the mind is necessarily debased, reduced in purity and fineness, and talents are seduced to become the panegyrists, or one who bestows praise of usurpation and tyranny, end quote. He adds that even sedition is not the most indubitable, not to be doubted, enemy to the public welfare, but that its most dreadful foe is despotism, which always changes the character of nations for the worst and is productive of nothing but vice, that the tyrant no longer excites to the pursuits of glory or virtue. Listen to this. It is not talents, it is baseness and servility that he cherishes, and the weight of arbitrary power that destroys the spring of emulations. And that was Helvetius that said that. Now, there's more there for Mercy. You're going to have to go to the website and for this newsletter to go in and digest the rest of it. But you can clearly see that everything that she was talking about in that section, in that list right there, if you break it out, is our present experience, because the demons learned how to manipulate everything within the Constitution, and we have had no response. come on back for Sam Adams in the next segment as we look through lawfare and the rest. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to this last segment of Samuel Adams. This is Tom Navolis, and it's important for you to understand as you go back, and those that only get the first and third segment, to go back and listen to that second segment about what Mercy Otis Warren had to say at her openings about the Constitution, and that, yes, she predicted the perversions of everything that we're living under. And she made a plea to you. She made a plea to you to investigate and to act. As I mentioned in the first segment, we have 1%, maybe 2 at most, that I can see that are actually contending for our liberties. And in particular, and I'm going to take time away from Sam Adams and Lawfare and Discouragements here, in particular, the Republican Party. People have gotten so apathetic, which she talks about here, in that, as you go and you read it at the website, not what I say in the second segment, but you have to read, is that the apathy that is upon us just says, oh, okay, yeah, those elected that we put in office, they'll take care of it. And they don't. And they're not, because the real action has to come from you. You have to stop FISA at the federal level. You have to stop transgenderism and other destructive actions on our people, our humanity, at the state levels. You have to stop the killing of babies. In Ohio, we took and allowed it to overwhelm us by the millions of dollars that came in from the evil sources that are out there that hate America, that hate humanity, and want that fundamental change, as Mercy said, to the destructive nature of liberty. Please tell your friends and families to get out and participate this election, every election, not just at the national level, but at the local and state level, must be attended to. We can no longer just allow that 1 or 2% to act. We can't just vote, which is our responsibility to do so. We have to act in mass like they did from 1764, which we're going to talk about here, all the way through 1788. Will it take that long again? How many years is that? 24 years? It took the enemy 50, 100 years to put this nation into the position it is. Actually, look at the time frame from when Obama came into office. That's only been 14 years. 14 years to destroy what is foundationally sound. It's going to take those that understand truth, understand true history, and the principles for a free people. It's going to take 24 years, starting with Sam Adams here on a letter of instruction. Do we do letters of instruction to our elected anymore? No, we just let them do whatever they damn well please, because that's what they do. They damn us. And that's why this nation is under judgment, is because we have not done this. Sam Adams writes, being members of the legislative body, you will have a special regard to the morals of this people, which are the basis of public happiness, and endeavor to have such laws made, if any are still wanting, as shall be best adapted to secure them. And we particularly desire you carefully look into the laws of excise, that if the virtue of the people is endangered by the multiplicity of oaths therein enjoyed, or their trade and business is unreasonably impeded or embarrassed thereby, the grievance may be redressed. So in this opening paragraph, he tells the legislature that they are responsible and regard the morals of the people. Oh, there it is. Our legislature does regard the morals of the people, as I've talked about before. Whose morals? The immoral, by biblical definition. So the morality that's being paid attention to is not the same morality of the founding era. No, the morality being instantiated in law is now, for the most part, at the states and national level, is the morality of those that are destructive to liberty and humanity. You have to understand that Sam is saying here the morals of the people, which are the basis of public happiness. And what are those laws? And you don't need to make new laws if they're not necessary. In fact, get rid of the ones that are destructive to what? Especially the ones on excise. That means taxation. Get rid of the taxation that are destructive to the virtue of the people. Boy, we have a lot of that on the property taxes. Our property taxes, by virtue of this insanity that we have here in the state of Ohio every 6 years, taking and reassessing, our property taxes are going up 30%. Isn't that something that needs to be looked at? And then what we see both at a state level and then also at the national level, what is going on around trade and business. That's what I'm talking about in relationship to lawfare. What are the laws? And then the discouragements on what's going on with trade and business. So he continues on, as the preservation of morals as well as property and right, so much depends upon the impartial distribution of justice. Here we go, lawfare. Agreeable to good and wholesome law. And as the judges of the land do depend upon the free grants of the General Assembly for support, that means in particular how judges get paid at the state level, at the community level, what are those salaries that they have. It is incumbent upon you at all times to give your voice for their honorable maintenance, so long as they, having in their minds an indifference to all other affairs, shall devote themselves wholly to the duties of their own department. And the further study of the law, by which their customs, precedents, proceedings, and determinations are adjusted and limited. It is up to the legislature, and even constitutionally for the United States, it is up to Congress to ensure the indifference. And we see that the Senate hearings are such a joke in so many ways. If we didn't have Mr. Kennedy from Louisiana calling out these leftists, to have minds of indifference to all other affairs and devote themselves wholly to their own department, keeping in their wheelhouse of interpreting the law, not making law, not doing a number of the lawfare, warfare with law. If they study the law, if you study it from the historical, foundational, and fundamentals, if you study those who wrote about our Constitution from the framework of the Constitution, we wouldn't have these insanities. And most of the laws done by Congress would be thrown out as unconstitutional. But quickly, to continue here, because we don't have a lot of time left with Mr. Adams, you will join in any proposal which may be made for the better cultivating the lands and improving the husbandry of the province. And as you represent a town which lives by its trade, we expect in every particular manner that you make it the objective of your attention to support our commerce in all its just rights, to vindicate it from all unreasonable impositions, and promote its prosperity. Our trade has for long times labored under great discouragements. What we have now is the great discouragements, especially at the federal level in our trade. I have to say, when Trump was in office, he encouraged our trade, and he did just right and vindicated all unreasonable impositions and promoted our trade. Now, what we have definitely is, it is with the deepest concern that we see such further difficulties coming upon it as will reduce it to the lowest ebb, if not totally obstruct and ruin it. That's what we got going on under Biden. We have the destruction. We have everything being reduced and ruined, totally ruined. There's so many companies that have been totally ruined. I had a phone call with a former colleague in a startup that I worked with a number of years ago. And they are now at the place of ruin because of this administration. We cannot help expressing our surprise that when so early notice was given by the agent of the intentions of the ministry to burden us with new taxes, so little regard was had to this most interesting manner, that the court was not even called, and the court being the legislative body was not called together to consult about it until later at the end of the year, and the consequence of which was the instructions could not be sent to the agent, so those solicited by him, till the evil had got beyond any easy remedy. You got to call evil what evil is. The way that the taxation, the way that our trade is being given away, the way that our businesses have gone to the likes of China in particular, is evil. Our founding father, Sam Adams, called that evil. We don't do that anymore. We don't call evil evil, because we move beyond the remedies. And now you have the Speaker of the House looking at funding more on Ukraine. You better get on the phone, people. You better be texting and emailing your representatives and saying no more money to Ukraine. Put it to the border. Secure the invasion. Stop the invasion. Better yet, get out, put up signs, get out, get people registered to vote for Trump and any solid conservative that you can determine for local elections, the House of Representatives, your state legislator, your county commissioners. I'm going to go here because this letter continues on with the severities that will prove detrimental to the nation, because he talks about Great Britain, but to the greater nation if you don't repeal a lot of the different acts that are going through. And worse is the destruction of this nation, and where he takes it to in the very end here, and we are not reduced from a character of free subjects. We're going to be reduced to the miserable state of tributary slaves. And that's what we are, to the globalists, to the whatever you want to call the rest of them, to the evils that are here with us, even those within the uniparty of this nation at the state and local levels. We are a tributary slave to everything that is going on. You now need to get out there and work for your liberty before it is completely gone. Sam Adams recognized it. I sure hope you do, and you will get out and fight.